No, you're exactly right. First of all, just to know, how many of you are here representing farms? So just quickly, tell me your farm and where it is.
My farm's in Green, Rhode Island.
Warwick and Cranston, Rhode Island.
But name me your farm in the town, yeah.
Coca Farm.
Stamp Farms, we're in Cranston, North Kingston.
Who else?
Turf Inc. all over South County.
All right.
Central Nursery, Johnston, and Gloucester.
Okay.
Brookside Equestrian Center in North Smithfield.
Okay. Anybody else for the farm?
The Robert Shaw Farm in Tiverton.
Okay. Anybody? All right, go ahead.
We're going to try and start one as well, trying to. We're going to go black flag farm.
Where's that going to be?
Green.
Green? Right over here?
Sharpen Farms, North Kingston, actually.
You brought the cookies, I heard?
No.
Oh, no? Who was that? Oh, that was Confreda Farm. Where's Betty? Is Betty here? No. No? Say hi to Betty for me. Is anyone else here representing another organization, some other organization? Or not? Okay, just concerned citizens other than that? All right, well, welcome. And listen, what you're doing tonight, and thank you to Doreen and Wayne for organizing this, and Ellen, of course. Ellen is on our board of directors. But this is citizen vigilance in action. It is your voices, your educated voices, what Gary and I are here to try to help you with a little knowledge that really can make a difference and can change policy. I can tell you when many of you, how many of you were there at that planning council meeting in December up at the Department of Treasury? That was impressive, I'll tell you that. And let me tell you, they heard you and they saw you. And that's how you make a difference. All right, we're here tonight. Our land, our rights, our local government. That was the name of the op-ed I wrote in October that kind of kicked off the public debate and pushback against Rhodemap. Gary had known about it for years and had been working in Barrington. We, our center, which is a nonprofit organization, have been studying it for years. We're waiting for the right time to come out against it. And that op-ed kind of kicked it off. And that's really what's at risk here. Our land, our rights, and the sovereignty of our locally elected local governments. I'm sure for most of you, especially those of you who have farms, for the rest of us who probably own homes, our property is the foundation of our family's financial security. And when some government agency starts threatening to mess around with that, that rightfully so should cause alarm. Also, in the American form of government, we all know that local government that is closest to you, closest to us, who are most accountable to us, those local officials we elect, not the statewide official, not those bureaucrats in Washington, that's the best government, because they will listen to you on a one-on-one basis. That is also at risk with this Rhodemap plan. So, as I talk about Rhodemap Rhode Island, Gary and I will probably take a few different tacks. Gary has become an expert at statewide and municipal implications. I'm going to try to give you a little bit of an overview of where this all comes from, because in order for you to understand some of the things Gary will talk about, I'm going to get into a situation in Richmond with you in a few minutes. But in order to really appreciate what we're talking about, you have to understand where this all sprang from, the genesis of the Rhodemap Rhode Island plan. And it goes back to the 80s and 90s. And many of you who are older like me probably remember the old famous Rio Earth Summit, which was one of the first international, all the green environmentalists got together and talked. And from that, it ended up at the United Nations with the belief that between global warming, between people expanding into open areas and building and developing, that is basically an unsustainable ailment on our world, basically. and that in order to ensure the earth and whatever else for future generations, we have to curtail this kind of free market sprawl, as they call it. And it's that basic principle that everything else derives from. And in Rhodemap Rhode Island, as Gary probably has a slide to show you, they basically point out that single family or single-use properties, like farms, like our homes, are the culprit. That's not sustainable. It's not equitable. It's not economically viable. It's not fair. So we have to do something about it. So what we have in Rhodemap Rhode Island, what happened back in the 90s was they created, you've all heard UN Agenda 21, or have you? How many of you have never heard of that before? All right, so go Google it on your own. Just look it up. UN Agenda 21. You don't have to take my word for it. It's everywhere. The rumor is that Senator Kerry and Senator Gore at the time convinced the then outgoing President George Bush to sign this non-binding treaty committing the United States to enact Agenda 21 principles in America. It was months later, he's out of office, and President Clinton comes in. President Clinton believed in all this stuff. He then tasked, he had a number of presidential orders, he then tasked all the federal agencies, well, many of the federal agencies, HUD and EPA and Transportation and many others, I want you to incorporate and work towards these principles in what you do in your departments. And then we all know in the 90s where there was the what many people believe led to the Great Recession 10 years later, which was for housing equity, was basically to give loans to families who really didn't financially meet loan requirements. But in the spirit of getting everybody a home, which is part of this whole philosophy, so that's where things like that, bad policies come from this idea. So Clinton kind of really got it entrenched into the U.S. departments. We're not sure what Bush, it seemed as if Bush the second kind of just let things stay where they were. And then when President Obama came in, he really put the foot to the pedal and the pedal to the floor, and really especially worked with DEM, EPA and HUD and the Department of Transportation, work in a coordinated manner to really try to make sure that housing was equitable. I mean, after all, that is HUD's name, you know, the urban and housing and urban development. But it became their core mission for them to define their own vision of equity and make sure that happened throughout America. And from that 1.9 million that Wayne mentioned, from that HUD Sustainable Communities grant program that was developed under Obama, which derived from the Agenda 21 back in the 1990s, that's how we got the Rhodemap Rhode Island plan. So what happened is this gentleman who will testify tomorrow in front of the House Oversight Committee, Kevin Flynn, an associate director, an unelected official, accountable to no one, in taking that grant, he committed the state of Rhode Island and its 39 cities and towns to adopt and adhere to HUD's 6 livability principles, which are really just a very slightly modified spin-off from the Agenda 21 principles. All right, so that's where it all comes from. And remember, we as single-family homeowners or single-use property developers are the bad guys. Okay, let's just you have to just know that they want us living in communal-type neighborhoods with multi-purpose land shared for common use, not for private use, as little as possible. And that's their vision of the American utopia. All right, so it's very, very important. According to the Heritage Foundation, Agenda 21 is a national organization. Agenda 21 is a voluntary plan adopted at the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environmental and Development. Unabashedly calls on governments to intervene and regulate nearly every potential impact that human activity could have on the environment. Okay, that's what it is. You don't have to believe me. Heritage National Group, Google it yourself. So, just to put it in a different spin, so one of the core philosophies stated in the Rhodemap Rhode Island document, consistent with the Agenda 21 and the HUD Sustainable Communities, is that urban sprawl is an evil, is contributing to the inequity and environmental problems we have and economic problems in our state, us, for what we do, what we in America have always been free to do with our own land. So, put another way, and Gary knows this well, if you look at it in even more detail, and you look into some of the racial quotas that HUD now believes must happen, we're also segregationists. They pretty much say it, don't they? I mean, it's almost right there. They almost say it verbatim just like that. That we are environmental, bandits, and that we are being wasteful of taxpayer dollars by demanding things like roads and sewers be built to service our homes and farms. Imagine that. So the goal of this movement, the sustainable living, smart growth, urban development, whatever you want, it has a whole number of names. The goal of all that, and Rhodemap Rhode Island, is to make it less and less attractive for us evil people to continue to live in our own single-family homes or to develop our land for single-use purposes. And drive people through a series of inequitable financial incentives, usually taxes, which we'll talk about in a second, into these high-density villages. That's their goal. Okay, so you have to understand what the end game is so that when we talk about some of the things in the middle, you can put that in perspective. So we're going to take a look here in a minute at a growth center plan for Richmond, Rhode Island. All right, now a growth center is a key component of the Rhodemap Rhode Island strategy, where they're going to build these little villages, these little growth centers in these targeted areas. Because that's how it's all going to become manifested. And they're going to need to do a lot of tricks with state laws and local zoning ordinances in order to get these growth centers built, and they're going to have to infringe on property rights and acquire land in honest or dishonest or constitutional or unconstitutional ways. But one way or another, they're going to get their damn growth centers built. Because you know how government is. And excuse me if I'm a little hyped up over this, but this really bothers me. And when I read some of the language in this growth center plan to you in a minute, you're going to see what I'm talking about. What they want, the utopian neighborhood, is a walkable neighborhood, a bikeable neighborhood, a mass transit neighborhood, where you can get to wherever you want to go by foot, by bike, or by mass transit. Now, we just had, think about that with the winter we just had. Okay? Think about that if you're a low-income family. And how many jobs can you get to on mass transit throughout different portions of the state? To me, the American dream included having our own home on our own property with our own yard and a white picket fence around it to do what we wanted to and play as we wanted to with our family and our own privacy. To me, that was part of the American dream, in addition to raising ourselves up the income ladder. But this unelected bureaucrat and his minions now wants to change that dream arbitrarily, without any public scrutiny, without any... And he has. The dream now is for you to live on the upper floors of a multi-use building with a common courtyard for common people to play with, and a balcony with a rail around it. in a small apartment, high density, or in houses all clustered together with common parking and common park areas. Who are these people to think that they can change our dreams and hopes for ourselves and our families? That's the real question. Who are these people? But they're everywhere. Let me tell you, they're everywhere. So let me get to this. Oh, and the other part of that is, like I said, financial incentives and disincentives. If you live where the government wants you to live, you will get preferential tax treatment. If you don't, you live where you want to live, where I want to live, you will get punished. You'll get higher taxes. You'll probably get your property rights restricted. Who knows what they'll do, and I'm going to go into that in just a second. Okay, so we don't have to speculate what's going to happen. Like I said, our center has been researching this for 2.5 years now. We're part of a national network. We're a think tank of like-minded think tanks. We have seen what has happened with other plans in other parts of the country. This is not new. Rhode Island would, however, become the first state, the first entire state to adopt these principles. It's happened in certain counties, it's happened in certain other cities. Rhode Island would be, but we're not the first place where this has happened. And if you look around at what's happened in other states and do the research as we've done to see what's happened in other states, let me give you a list of tactics that they will use in that carrot and stick approach I talked to you about before. How they will reward the people who do what the government wants and punish the others. So keep these in mind throughout the rest of my talk and Gary's as well. First, you're going to see unsubstantiated claims of economic benefits. That just by building, it's a build it and hope they will come and hope it will grow mentality. You want to invest millions and millions of taxpayer dollars and resources and hope that somehow that produces prosperity. America was formed, towns were formed when first there was commerce and trade and activity, and then towns built around that trade. They want to do it backwards. We want to build these ideal little utopian centers and hope that good things will happen. Exaggerated false claims of public support. They claim in this document, public supports this. We know what they've done. We know the tricks they use. I saw the North Kingston survey that they put out that doesn't even allow you to say no or I don't like that in any question. You have to pick one of the, if you answer the question. Eminent domain abuse. Limit your development rights. Force you to have mixed land use. Water rights infringements, using water rights as a means to confiscate or limit what you do on your property. There was a bill 3 years ago, maybe 2, that would have created a new water authority in this state. That water authority, it said it in plain English about as clearly as I'm about to tell it to you right now. It would have given this authority unlimited, unfettered rights to go onto your land, dig around for water to determine if you're connected to some underground or above ground waterway that might impact the whole state's water system, and then seize your land if they think you're threatening the state's water system. This is part of the Rhodemap Rhode Island agenda. Other tools. They will limit your transportation and energy usage in the name of green alternatives. They may limit future infrastructure. If you want to build a new home a little bit outside, sorry, we're not going to build your road or sewer. Again, we want to make it more difficult for you to sprawl. And then the stick and carrot approach. Targeted taxation on properties they want or punish you for. Preferential tax treatment for developers and people who live within the desired zones. Higher property taxes on everybody. They actually propose removing the annual property tax levy cap Right now, there's a cap, right, 4%. They talk about removing that so that they can tax you more to fund those growth centers. All right, think about that. And then inequitable property taxes. Gary's involved in a suit in Barrington. We're going to tax people who live outside our growth center or preferred zones one rate, and we're going to mandate lower taxes for people who live in there. That's how they create the incentive to try to move you along. So let's look at this Richmond. You can go to rhodemap.rhodeisland.com or .org, I don't know. And under the documents section, there's a bunch of growth centers, and one of them is Richmond. So I'm going to literally just go through this and literally use their words. This is their words, and then talk about it. So one of the goals is to promote equitable and affordable housing and strengthen the state's growth center policies. Again, this conflict between the state superseding the rights of localities. You should only, in your localities, you should only be concerned about your municipality. You are not there to serve the interests of the state. Compact development is a goal. High density living. For many of you, especially those of you on farms and many of you in South County, that's an anathema. You came down here to have the space. Right? No. We want compact developments. Mixed use, denser, and more walkable development. Again, we talked about that. I'm just going to read you. Some of them don't even need explanation. Implementing conservation strategies to protect forests, fields, and farmland. Now, that may sound good, but by protecting, that means limiting what you can do as well. Just remember, you got to know their language. And they do that by only making certain allowable uses of land. Okay, right in the document. The proposed growth center site in Richmond includes the golf course and half a dozen private parcels. So they want to build these growth centers on land where it's currently owned by private people. Seems like a problem, right? Well, somehow they're going to get that land. I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to use one of those tools I told you about before, but they're going to make sure they get that land. One is a developable parcel across from Town Hall in Richmond. It's a 7-acre lot. We looked it up. It's owned by a guy named Bradley Smith. Does he know he's about to sell his land? Or have it taken from him? Jim, you know what I'm talking about. Vacant or underutilized land available to the east and west of the elementary school. Again, they're looking at this land. It's not being developed, even if it's privately owned. We want to do something with it, even if you, as the owner, just want to sit on it. By protecting these open space resources as a green belt surrounding the growth center. Nothing can happen on these properties. We must insulate them with these nice green areas. Private land. And of course, all with the goal of building these dense, walkable villages. This page talks about issues and constraints to the growth center plan, which potential problems in building the growth center. Wait to hear some of this. The first one, number 1. The provision of food and other services within the golf course in Richmond limits the potential that golfers would patronize new businesses in the growth center. So they see existing private businesses as a competition and a threat to their holy plan. What do you think they're going to do about that? Think of those tools I told you. They're going to start taxing this guy more. They're going to take away his licenses for alcohol. What are they going to do? It's a threat. Lack of sidewalks. Going to build more sidewalks, even if it goes over private property. Or bike paths, right, Jim? Desire to preserve farmland creates possible conflict with future expansion of growth center. you might be in their way. You have a lot of land. It's the nature of farms. They want to put a growth center there. What do you think they're going to do? I don't know. Go back and look at those tools. Look at what they've done in other states. Even bigger than the golf course, competing commercial centers. Their language. The economic potential of the growth center is limited by the existing commercial district a few miles west on 138 at the Wyoming interchange. If you're one of those business owners and the government thinks you're in their way, what's going to happen? I'll tell you what they've done in other cities and towns. They use the excuse of blight. If there's one, maybe building that's vacant, the whole neighborhood's blighted. It's an eyesore. It's a stain on the community, therefore we can take it by eminent domain. That's what they've done in other states. Is that what they're going to do here? I don't know. Just read their words. It sends chills. Of course, part of your property tax increases will go to build new infrastructure for those growth centers. So you've already got people living out here and they're already serviced by sewers and roads, but now we're going to pull everybody into these growth centers. That means we got to build even more sewers and things like that, right? So that's going to cost money. They talk about that as one of the funding. Mixed land uses. Much of the existing development of Richmond is segregated into separate residential, commercial, and civic districts. Yeah, it means each of you are doing what you want with your own land, right? Kind of American way, isn't it? Well, this site, this growth center site, provides an opportunity to mix all these uses together. In other words, we can have you use part of your farmland for a public park or something, or whatever, I don't know. Potential future network of bike trails. Jim, can I mention?
Yeah, he's right here.
Yeah, Steve, your property. You look at one of their maps, they got a bike trail going right through his property. One way or another, they're going to get that. In Dayton, Ohio, at that planning commission meeting, I told the story of a woman in Dayton, same thing. They had to have this bike path. The bike path was scheduled to go 2 feet from the front door of this house where this elderly wheelchair-bound woman lived. She had a ramp, you know, for the wheelchair to get up there. That ramp was on where the bike path. They didn't care. They seized her land, cut down the trees in her yard, built that bike path, and took her ramp away. They're going to get what they want unless we stop them. Now. Permanently protect the green belt of open space around the site. There's something called, many of you probably use them, and probably more, any of you familiar with transfer development rights? Yeah, TDRs. They can be a legitimate tool if allowed in the free market way to be used voluntarily. But transfer development rights basically say, let's say you own property here and you have certain rights, certain things you can build on it, right, over here. Let's say the growth center now is over here, but the zoning says, you know what, I can't build a 4-story building, but I can over here. So I sell my development rights to the developer. I can build a 4-story building on my land, but I can't over here. So I'm going to sell my rights to this developer, or as the state professes, to the state in a state bank of development rights. And then we'll sell it or give it to a developer, so now your rights have been transferred to this property so I can build whatever it is I need to build here. In exchange for that, you might get a little money, but you also give up forever the rights to develop your property. You still own the property, but it's far less value to it now. Now, if done in a voluntary manner, okay. But let me skip ahead, and it says in their own document, it must be emphasized that a purely voluntary TDR program is a weak tool for implementing land use policies. TDR is much more effective when it's established as a complement to a mandatory rezoning strategy. In other words, they will force you to sell your development rights to somebody else so they can build their precious growth centers. And unless that TDR program encompasses a significant portion of an active real estate market, it's useless. So we have to, so in other words, they have to do it on a mass scale. This is your government talking to you. Now let me finish up here. Unnecessary driveways. Who cares if you got a car or your own private driveway? It may be unnecessary. We might need it for a bike path. The concept for the Richmond Growth Center revolves around the expansion of community uses. And that pretty much, I'm going to cut my talk short because I think you're getting the gist of it. I could go on. But that's the gist of it. That the common good, arbitrarily defined by these ideologues, to them usurps, or I should say, is more important than your individual rights as land and property owners. All right, so this is really what's going on here. This arbitrary vision created by these extreme radical kooks, and I don't have any problem calling them that. They want to codify it into our state law at the state level, in your local comprehensive plans for your municipalities, that the common good is defined by this plan is more important and more sacred than your individual rights. And that's really what it's all about here today. What a locality does with its zoning is up to it. If you decide you want to have growth centers, then have a growth center. But the way Rhodemap Rhode Island is structured, the state will mandate it, the federal government, HUD will mandate it, as Gary will get into. They will mandate the racial makeup you must have in your communities. They will mandate the income mix makeup you have in your communities. Those are decisions that must be left to your local governments. Should not be decided at the state level, at the federal level.
So who has the final word, your local government?
No,
The local zoning doesn't?
no. What happens is, Gary will get into, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but if I just may, what you will see generally is that when a state commits to HUD, or a municipality takes money from HUD and promises, you read the fine print, and promises to do this equitable, sustainable living, it appears the courts, it's not clear, but it appears as if those contracts, those contractual terms with the federal government supersede your local zoning ordinances. That's how they do it. Now you've got a constitutional crisis here. We got local ordinances, good ordinances by the people, and you got a top-down set of mandates contracted for when your town accepts money and these growth centers start getting built, or when our state signs on it. And that's the constitutional crisis we have. Not to mention your own individual rights, which is the core property rights, which is the foundation of our constitutional rights, is your right to own and develop your own property the way you want. So again, I conclude with our rights, our land, our local government. Last point, then I'll take questions. I'm going to apologize. I'm going to leave a little early. We've got a little family medical situation at home, so I want to get home to that. But Wayne, thank you for broaching it. When Wayne talked about us raising a few dollars, it's not so much for us. I want to bring in there are some national groups and national experts out there who are fighting Rhodemap Rhode Island type programs throughout the country. We're in contact with them. Yeah, Rosa Quarry is one of them. A guy named John Anthony is another one. They're out there, but they cost money to bring in. There's more research we can do. We can do some investigative journalism to follow some of what we know will be some of the crony and do some exposés on stuff like that. We can do social media and paid ad. We just want to raise some money to put a campaign together to defeat Rhodemap Rhode Island, to wipe it. I mean, Speaker Mattiello took the partial good step of saying, you know, I'm not sure I like this, I'm just going to put it on the shelf. But you know what? It lives on the shelf. Right now, unless some of these other laws get passed, those principles must be incorporated into your locality's comprehensive plans. It lives on the shelf. It must be killed and buried. So we want to raise some money to try to kill it and bury it. We've got a plan, we've got a strategy, but it's going to cost us some money. So you can see me or ask either of Doreen's or Ellen to get in touch with us. But that's what we would do with any funds we would raise from this, is dedicate them towards beating this plan, not just to put into our general coffers. We've got a plan. It's about $25,000-$50,000 at the max. At the high end, you know, if we want to do it, you know, we'll do it. We'll work with whatever we have, but we need to kill this thing, because your livelihood, your properties, your family's financial security is at risk, and I just want you to know that. So thank you for your time. I'll take a few questions if there's time for that.
Just a reminder about the oversight committee tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. So the House Oversight Committee is concerned, has heard about, they've called in Director Flynn and asked him to justify what he's doing. He's going to make a presentation. There will be no public testimony tomorrow, but it's going to be very interesting to hear what it says. Gary and I have supplied some of the committee members with some really good questions that we hope they will ask. I don't know how it's going to go, I don't know how much time. I don't know if it's going to be a smoke and mirror thing or a real good investigation. It's our government, so I doubt they're going to really dig too hard up there, but we'll see what happens. But if you can make it to the State House tomorrow at 4:30 in room 101, it should be an interesting show. If you don't, I think it's going to be on tape on Capitol TV at some point. So any questions before we introduce Gary? Yes, sir.
Is there any way to kill this other than the state of Rhode Island refusing to take federal money? Because as soon as we take the money, strings come with it. As far as HUD goes, we've been involved in that on Dame Farm, and HUD was involved because it was state-owned property. HUD said, to the state of Rhode Island, you're not charging enough for the rent in that house. Right. They tripled the rent because the feds told them
you can only charge 8%. Yeah.
And they said that applied to all state properties.
Well, that's how Woonsocket ended up in the shape it's in. Woonsocket is the poster child for HUD programs. They've got way past the recommended 10% of affordable housing. They've taken HUD money. They've signed the magnet. They can't raise enough money. They're driving out because of those inequitable taxes I told you about, where they're punishing, you know, people who live outside of the preferred region. The people who live in those HUD housing, those subsidized housing, they're not generating because HUD won't let them. The tax rates are so low, the city can't raise enough money from them. Everybody else is refusing to pay the high rates and leaving, so you've created this enormously backwards tax base in Woonsocket, and that's one of the reasons why Woonsocket's in the mess it is. And just think of that. Now they want to do Woonsocket to every other city and town in our state. It's absolutely insane. So, yeah, that's kind of what happens. But I don't know how you put the toothpaste back in this bottle.
I don't.
We don't know.
If we don't refuse to take the money, which everybody needs so desperately, and they're breaking their neck to get every penny they can, then they own us.
Yep.
And that's as simple as that.
Yep. All right, let me introduce Gary. I'll sneak out in a few minutes, but I want to hear a little bit of what Gary has. But Gary has really been a great aid to this movement. He has been fighting firsthand, hand-to-hand combat with, not so much with HUD, but with a lot of HUD's acolytes right in the town of Barrington. He's in the middle of a lawsuit about the inequitable taxation we mentioned before. He's become a great friend. He's the most knowledgeable guy on the legal and the just practical implications of Rhodemap Rhode Island type policies at the state level and especially at the municipal level. And you really need to hear what he's got to say. And so I want you to give a good welcome to Gary Morse.